Hello, everybody. It is time to make a polar bear. I hope that you are having a good Saturday so far. I just wanted to let you know that today's class is mostly about little tips and tricks to get you through making the Elizabeth Hartman polar bear. Now, most of the instructions are going to be in your pattern that you have, but there are a few extra things that you're going to want to look out for. Here we are. Okay, so we're ready to make a polar bear. I've got the polar bear behind me here. And here he is. He's cute. Now this block is going to measure about 24 inches when you're finished, so it's pretty big. Doesn't even fit on the screen here. And we're not going to make the entire block today. The purpose is to really show you how you different tricks that I use to make half square triangles that are a little bit different than is in the pattern. It's also a way that we will be able to kind of show you how I keep track of all of these different pieces. The number one key ingredient doing this is the seam ripper, because so many times if you walk away from this project, it's really easy to sew things together the wrong way. And the case in point, when I show you what's coming up next month, yeah. But it's easy sewing, but you have to be mindful while you're doing it. So I'm going to transfer over to our construction cam. So over here on the construction cam is our pattern, and because this is the first block, we want to really delve into some theories on how everything is getting put together. So I am going to go through and show you how I do some of these stitches. You want to pay attention particularly to page 4. Page 4 is how to sew the diagonal seams. So when we're looking at step 1, for instance, in this scenario, they're taking let me just get this moved over here properly. The purpose is to take a square and to sew another square in the corner like this, and then stitching from corner to corner, and then flipping that corner piece over. Now, one little trick I would like to share is that when I put a small square on top of a large square like this, I do not trim the background piece. I only trim the bulk away from the top piece. And so then ultimately the piece looks like this. Then when we look at diagonal seams, now we don't have any like these in block 1, but we do have a, hang on just a moment. But we do have a, we don't have a block like this, but this is joined together just like you would sew your quilt bindings together. So if any of you have ever made a quilt binding, then you'll know that this piece here is very similar to that. So you take 2 rectangles, lay them on top of each other, stitch corner to corner, and then in this scenario I do trim both the background and the front piece. And then ultimately you want a nice straight piece with that diagonal seam. Then this page covers the half square triangles, and I'm going to show you a few techniques on how to make those. And then same goes with the flying geese. But before we can get started with any of those piecings, let's take a look at what is in your cute little project container that you picked up here at the store. So we have our background fabric is the Art Gallery Pure Solids Blue. That's what this piece is here. Then we have Robert Kaufman's Carolyn Friedlander CF collection, and this is really a light white. This is a white with a very faint grid work type pattern in it, and this is, I think, what people are calling a low volume fabric now, and that is going to be the polar bear, but it's also fabric 1. Fabric 2 is also from Art Gallery, and this is just a sage green fabric with little sprigs in it. We also have Palette. This is a deep forest green from Palette. Palette is very marbled-like, not batik, but it's got like a mottled look to it. And Palette is actually from Baum Textiles. Then we have another Art Gallery Pure Solid. This is a sagey green. Then we've got the Art Gallery little arrow designs. And then a Kaufman gingham. This feels really soft. I would love a blouse out of this. But this is the sagey kitchen gingham. And then finally, this is the detail fabric. This is just a little square that you'll need to make the polar bear eyes and snout. So those are all of the fabrics that you need. And I'm going to put these aside for just a minute. In addition to the fabrics, you're going to need the pattern. And this is the North Stars pattern. And we are going to be going in order. So as you can see here, there's the polar bear. The walrus is going to be next month, then the owl, and so forth until we get through all of the blocks of the quilt. It is important, even though we're going month by month, that you do look through the front of the book and make sure that you have, particularly for those of you that have all of your fabric kits ready, you might want to go through and just make sure that you have that you can kind of determine where you want the fabrics. Now, a lot of these kits, we cut fat eighths of all of the different fabrics. So if you don't like where we put some of the fabric, you would have the option to switch things around just a little bit. Now you're going to be cutting these things out. And there are no really diagrams to cut all of the different fabrics out, but there are these little markings here that kind of lay out suggestions for cutting. When I cut, I typically take some of the wider pieces or the longer pieces, and I cut those out first, or I cut a strip of those out, and then I subcut into the different pieces. So let's look at our polar bear piece and talk about that. Let's take the background fabric, for instance. So when our background fabric starts with pieces N and goes through BB. I don't go necessarily in order of this. I kind of look at what is the largest piece I'm going to be cutting here. And I can see here there were some 6-inch strips. So I'll determine, cutting in those 6-inch pieces. So I'll cut a 6-inch piece that will be 2 inches wide, then one that would be 1.5 inches. Then I go down to my next piece. Oh, here, there's a 12.5 inch. There's a 10.5 inch. I would deal with those first to make sure we get those longer pieces, because the other little shorter ones will be easily pulled from that. Now, because there is a lot of different pieces with this background fabric, Elizabeth has given us recommendations here from our fat eighth, and a fat eighth is 9 inches by 21 inches. So there's a recommendation here, but there's no recommendation for the fabric 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. But these are pretty much just squares to make the flying geese units and the half square triangles. So let's talk about the different numbers that are here on the different pieces. So when I cut out any of the pieces, I am going to take my pieces, put them in a little pile, I clip them together or I pin them together. And I use a Sharpie marker and a label. And you don't have to use fancy labels like this. You can use painter's tape, but I make sure that I'm writing what that pile of specific sizes are, even if it's just one piece. So once you cut and you need to label, I'll write an N if it's piece N that I'm cutting, cut that label off, and then put this to label my piece. And then I not only label all of the pieces like A, B, C, N, and so forth, once I start sewing my units together, I will also label those units, because once you take the NN off, or the PP off, or I can't believe I just said that, but there it is. But once you take the letters off, you might forget for a moment which fabric is, making up your NN and your QQs and so forth. So it's important to label as you go. So let's move on to our first instructions that we're going to do. The first instructions that we're making is going to be in this portion right here. We are going to be making 14 FFs by AAs, so that's a half square triangle unit. We're going to be making 8 GG and AAs, 4 JJs and GGs, 4 JJs and AAs. So let's start with these half square triangles. So I am going to use FF and AA as an example. Now there's 14 of these, and that's a considerable amount of half square triangles to make at one time. I want to review the way that Elizabeth is making these half square triangles on page 4, is that she has you cut 3-inch half square triangles, or 3-inch squares, to form 2 half square triangles that will ultimately then need to be trimmed down to 2.5 inches. So not only are you having to mark lines on all of these half square triangles, but then you're also having to create additional work by trimming them all down to size. So when you're trimming something down to 2.5 inches, that means that your finished half square size is going to be 2 inches. And there's a formula. The formula for figuring out how big to make a half square triangle is your finished block size, which in this case is 2 inches, plus 7/8 of an inch. So you really should be cutting 2 7/8 of an inch, sewing in this manner where a line is drawn corner to corner, and then you stitch exactly 1/4 inch from each of those lines, and then you cut, and when you press open, it should measure 2.5 inches. But that's kind of hard to do. So this is a very viable method for a beginner. So if you do not feel confident in your 1/4 inch piecing skills, this is definitely a great way to go. You make your 3-inch squares, and you take your 3-inch squares, and I've got my little pieces here, and I labeled them with a heat vanishing pen. So this is AA and FF. I don't know if the camera is really picking that up very well, but you can label them this way too. If I have the stickers or the painter's tape available, I use that method. So in this method, we're going to take our material and we're going to put it right sides together. And then there's a few different tools that you can use. You can use the quick quarter tool. The quick quarter tool, you literally just line up this little dude and you make a dash down the middle, and then you can even draw your sewing lines next to it. Now this piece is available here at the store, and we are selling online. So if you need some supplies, you can order online, or you can give us a call and we will package stuff up to you and get it straight to your house. I like this little ruler. This is like a little 1/4 inch rod. It's available from Nifty Notions. And I just line this guy up corner to corner. And I have 2 heat vanishing pens here. These actually come in a set of about 6, I think. And there's different colors. There's white, blue, red, black, green. But in this case, I'm going to use the blue. If I needed to mark on that dark green fabric, I could use the white. So there's the line. Now, that is not the sewing line. I want to repeat. You're going to make 2 half square triangles out of this. So we're going to sew 1/4 of an inch away from the line and 1/4 of an inch away from the line. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. So we're going to switch cameras for a moment. All right, so here we are at our BERNINA 770 machine, and I have the number 97 foot attached. Now this 97 foot is a patchwork foot for the 9mm wide machines. This guide that's in here is great if you're doing strip piecing, but we're going to be doing these half square triangles today, and I don't really want to see the, I don't really need the guide on there. I want to be able to see the side of the foot. I'm going to take the foot off for a minute so you can also see that I'm using the straight stitch needle plate. This is just a really great way to get a nice, perfect straight stitch, and also a way that our little triangle corners aren't going to get sucked down into the needle plate. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's not fun, and it doesn't help with your accuracy, that's for sure. So I'm lining this up under the needle, and my drawn line is here. There's also little lines on the stitch plate and on this table. These diagonal lines also can help you line up your piece exactly the way that you need to start. You can see here the edge of this fabric is right along the edge of this diagonal line. So I'm going to line this up. I'm using my freehand system to put the foot down. Sorry, I had to reach under the machine to put my foot control down there because our Roomba eats foot controls in the middle of the night. All right, so let's get this little guy under here. And now I'm going to start sewing. Now my machine is going to burp because I haven't made a stitch yet with it this morning. So don't be alarmed, it's completely normal. See, I told you. Now, I'm stitching right along the line because I find that that is really helpful to keep the fabric together while I stitch on either side to really help my accuracy. But now, as I line this up, I'm going to line up right with the edge of the foot along that stitching line. So I'm actually making 3 rows of stitching. I'm stitching down the middle to just hold my pieces together so they don't shift. And then I'm stitching on the left side of this line. And I'm just going to go straight down this piece of material, lining the edge and my drawn line that also has the stitching line on top of it along the right side of the foot. And then I'm using my thread cutter when I get to the end. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Just exactly what I just did. All right, so now I'm going to cut. And now what I have is a piece with 3 threads. Now it was probably a little egregious of me to do that extra stitching, but I swear it really does keep everything nice and flat for you. So now let's go back over to our construction section. And we want to trim this piece down. So you can trim down obviously with a rotary cutter. You can trim with scissors. I actually am just going to use the rotary cutter and just go down this line. This doesn't have to be very accurate because I've already done my stitching, so I'm not trying to keep some beautiful work of art here. So now I have 2 triangles. And in quilting, I know that the instructions will tell you to press seams open, but I'm kind of old school, so I press to the dark side. I like this better. It helps me with some piecing accuracy. So now I'm just finger pressing, but I would prefer to use my Laura Star iron. It just won't fit in this seam that I've got going on here. So we're finger pressing with my non-existent fingernails. All right. So now here is our piece. Now, I love rulers. I have a collection of all different kinds, but I'm using this Tula ruler with the little unicorn. The unicorn on the back is actually the grippy stuff, so you can line your ruler up and it doesn't slide around. This ruler also has diagonal lines on it, and this is how you're going to square up a piece. So I'm going to take my diagonal line and line it up. Just this diagonal line is going to line up it even with between my dark and my light pieces here. And I'm just going to go as close to the edge as I can, and I'm going to make a cut. I'm just cutting a little sliver of these things off. It's always important to remember to close your rotary cutter blade after every cut because those little buggers are sharp. Okay, so I've squared up this end, and now I'm going to line up here so my diagonal line is still going right in the middle of the dark fabric and the light fabric, and now I'm lining it up right on the 2.5 inch line, and I'm going to trim the rest of this off. So now I have a perfect 2.5 inch half square triangle. And now let's just repeat. So now I'm going to line this up just to cut a sliver off. I'm going to line this guy up 2.5 inches. All right, now we have 2. Now imagine doing several of those. Now I'm going to show you another tool and another technique to do these, and this might just benefit you in a world outside of this quilt, but because we're making so many of this one particular unit, this is the AAFF unit, there needs to be 14 of these. I decided that if I were going to do this quilt again, I would actually use a product like this. This is triangles on a roll, and they come in different sizes. You have to look down in this section right here, but this says 2-inch finished half square triangles, and so that's what this is, 2-inch finished, exactly what we're making. So this little unit here is going to make 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 of these. But we need 14. So I pulled out this, and this is our FF fabric and our AA fabric. And you are going to take your fabrics and put them right sides together. And then you're going to lay your pattern, your triangles on a roll paper right on top. And you're going to follow the arrows, and you're going to stitch on the dotted line, and you're going to cut on the solid line. So first we're going to do our stitching back at our sewing machine. So here we are. I don't need to change my feet. I don't need to do anything like that. We are going to be ripping paper off eventually, so I am adjusting my stitch length to 2 millimeters long. And I'm just going to line this up right on the dotted line. So I don't have to worry about seam allowance or anything. I'm going to turn my light off here for a minute so that you can see what's going on. I'm literally lining up where my needle's going to go right down that dotted line here on this piece of material. And I'm going to follow all of these lines. I'm just going to travel here in the seam allowance. pivoting when you come to an intersection. If only I had some time-lapse videos, we could speed this process up, but you know what? It's Saturday morning. A bunch of us aren't really going anywhere. So you might as well just sit here and watch me make half square triangles using triangles on a roll. All right, I just have one more pass. Now, I'm not saying that I would use this triangles on a roll method for every single time you have to make a half square triangle. I am just simply recommending it for the ones that you have to make a lot of. And if you're curious, yes, we do have triangles on a roll here, and yes, we can ship them to you, and it's free shipping on anything over $50. All right, I've done all of my stitching. Now we bring it over here to the table, and we're going to do our cutting. Now remember, we're going to cut on the solid lines. And so we can use our smaller ruler like this for most of the pieces, or you might even consider getting just a little bit larger ruler so that you can cut more length. So I stepped away for just a minute to grab a longer ruler. Good morning, Betty So Fun. Thank you for joining us. Betty So Fun is joining us from the West Coast, so she got up early this morning. Okay, I'm starting by just cutting on these longer lines. Don't forget, you can comment on our videos. It's fine. I like hearing your questions. I'm also somebody that really does feed off an audience, so it's hard for me actually to just talk by myself here to the camera. All right, so now this is where we can probably downsize our ruler. And I'm cutting these. Now that is one triangle set. That's another triangle set. Here's another. I'm just going to slide my ruler up here. There's another set. So look at that. I made 1, 2, 3. I made 4 already. I will try to speak up, Jean. I have my mic on my laptop, and so let me know if when I'm talking a little bit louder that it's better. All right, so you can see I got through several of these pretty quickly, and I would just go and cut the rest of them. But once you have a piece from this, we can just easily remove the paper And that's why I adjusted my stitch length to be a little closer together so that the paper would be perforated better. Now remember, I have new fingernails, so this becomes a challenge. Okay. There we go. So, finger pressing, and then measuring, and I've got a perfect 2.5-inch square. And you would just make 14 of those that way. So that's just another technique. Another unit that we need to make is a flying geese unit. And that would be this one right here that we see here. This one, just like I told you, I label it EE, because this is EE plus KK plus EE. So I am going to be making our BB plus KK plus BB. So you take your 2.5-inch square and you put it down, because these are from the pile that's been cut at 2.5 inches. So we take a 2.5 inch and lay it on top of this 2.5 by 4.5 inch piece. And now we're going to sew corner to corner. Now, you might be a drawer, and that's okay. I tend to just eyeball it from corner to corner using those diagonal lines on my sewing machine. But for the sake of this video, I am going to draw the line for you. All right, the line is drawn. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw the line on the other one, corner to corner, because I'm going to sew this whole unit while I'm at the sewing machine. And then I'm going to take my duckbill scissors with me as well. That's those. Okay, so our first piece is going to be this unit that I drew on first. And you can see here I've got, now this one, the line that I drew is definitely the stitching line. So this one is not where we will sew on one side and then sew on the other. We are going to stitch right down this drawn line. Then once you get to the end, remember the instructions are telling us to cut our piece right here like this, to cut through both pieces. But I don't do that. I feel like I can be more precise if I leave my KK piece as a foundation to piece off of. So I am simply trimming only the blue background BB material. So that's what this looks like. Then I'm going to finger press over. Now don't worry about my KK and my BB pieces on there. Those are going to press out when I do my official pressing with my iron. But now I'm ready to do this other side. So I'm placing the material right side down, once again exposing my drawn line, lining that up under the presser foot, and now I'm going to stitch. And now I've got my duckbill scissors again, only trimming the BB portion of the fabric. And then I'm going to finger press. So let's go back to the construction camera. And now I have my BB, KKBB. Now, remember how I told you, I don't know if you can see this or not, that I find I can be a bit more accurate if I don't trim my background piece off? I probably was talking and wiggling while I was trying to sew, but my little edge is sticking out a little bit from this background material. And if I would have trimmed that away, my piece might have ended up being a little smaller than I wanted. So I'm glad I left that in there. And remember what I said also about labeling your piece? Well, I've got my BB plus KK plus BB on there. And so there, now I've got another flying geese unit that I can put with this piece. And so I am lining up, I'm lining up all of these units. So ultimately I would use the half square triangle technique to make these, and I would use my stitch and flip square on a material square on a rectangle to do these flying geese units. So that's what we have done so far. Now I'm going to turn the page and show you it's time to start taking all of those other little bits that you cut, all of the D pieces, the B pieces, the E pieces, all of those pieces need to be methodically assembled together. And so, for instance, figure 1 is literally taking an A piece, which is the nose of the polar bear from that black detail, and adding 2 of the fabric number 1, which is the white Carolyn Friedlander CF low volume fabric from Kaufman, and taking 2 of those E pieces and stitching and flipping. Now, they are cutting away the excess there, and in this case, this might not be a bad idea because the white fabric on black, it will show through a little bit. Now I wanted to make a unit to show you how you need to kind of match things up just a little bit. So I made this unit that's an ear, this F with the N, P, and the Q. I made one of these units already. And there that is. So the F material is the Carolyn Friedlander, and the P, N, and Q is our background material. And you can see what I did with these pieces, only trimming away the light blue fabric, but leaving my base fabric as a sturdy base that I can use to when I'm piecing together easily. But what I'm talking about here is joining these 2 pieces together, because I think that this is something that really warrants going over. We ultimately want to stick those pieces together, and we want to make sure that we are really lining up this corner to this corner, because these blocks, they're 24 inches finished, and if you don't do your best effort to keep all of these seams really nicely aligned and using the proper seam allowance and measuring as you go, your blocks may not all fit together at the end. Now, it's not the end of the world if they're off by a little bit. That can be adjusted when you put the sashings on, but it's always best to just get everything as accurate as possible as you go through the process. So I'm lining up these 2 pieces, and I'm really feeling with my fingers that these blue pieces are together. And then I'm going to pin right before the edge, not after it. So right before that intersection, I'm pinning. And I'm just gonna double check that they're really indeed that they're lining up. And you can see earlier that I actually had sewn this piece to this piece, and I took too skinny of a seam allowance. I was trying to do it too quick. So then I had to come back and take a little fatter seam so that my pieces were just right. Okay, let's sew this little bugger together. So here we are back at the sewing machine. Now, what don't we do with our machine? Of all of the things that are really bad to do to your machine, can you think of the thing that's really bad to do? Yes, that's right. Sew over a pin. So don't sew over your pin. Get your project lined up here. Start stitching. Get everything in place. And right before you get to the pin, just right before, you're going to remove that pin. And I'm just going to tuck it in down here at the bottom because this is just such a tiny, tiny, tiny little seam. Don't forget how important it is to use that knee lever to sew and lift your foot out of the way so that you can really get this material under the machine just exactly the way you want it. And so there's your, oops, sorry, I forgot to go over to our construction cam. All right, so that's our piece sewn together with our nice little point. So that is how that's done. Ann Stitch, I am using a full 1/4 of an inch. I am lining up the edge of the material right to the 1/4 inch on the foot. I experimented exactly where to line these things up, but I found that if I tried to take a little less than what I thought, then it wasn't measuring right. And if I tried to take a little bit more than what I thought, then it wasn't measuring right. So yeah, scant 1/4, I always try to do everything with exactly a 1/4 inch. Does anybody else have any questions? I know there's a slight delay in the video, but I wanted to just address any questions that we might have, and I can wait here while we find out. I'd just like to take a second to really thank all of you for tuning in this morning. We have a lot of these projects that we're going to start streaming. Maybe some of the streams will be shorter because they'll just be short little technique videos. But then we also are going to more than likely need to invest in different microphones and so forth so that you can hear us better. We do realize that. But we started these videos really without, thinking about them so far in advance because of the current situations that we're in. So I'm really appreciative that you all are tuning in. You should have enough fabric to do the 8 at a time cutting method for the half square triangles. When I cut for the blocks, I did have a little bit left over. All right, well, I'm going to sign off for now. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. You can continue to chat with us here on Twitch, or you can also send me an instant message on Facebook. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/Bernina of Naperville. You can also find this video on this Twitch feed for the next 14 days, and then we will be sending it over to YouTube. And on our YouTube channel, make sure you go to YouTube and find Bernina of Naperville. Then you're going to like us, comment, subscribe, and if you want to know the minute that we upload any new videos, you're going to click the little bell, and that will send you notifications when we add new material. So next month, let's have a look at what we're doing. We are making this walrus, and there is a blatant error on this block. I don't know if you can notice it, but it's staring at me. I see it. Let me just show you the actual real walrus so that you will know if maybe you can spot the difference. So while you're looking at it there, I did fix it. So let's go back to the laptop camera. Haha. So the walrus, when I originally put this together, like I told you, you need your seam ripper handy because I sewed the top section a little janky. So the photo online at BERNINAofNaperville.com does not reflect the fact that I saw my mistake and I fixed it. And yes, Jean, we can ship you supplies. So if you just give us a call and let us know, I will be happy to send that to you. So visit BERNINAofNaperville.com and you can search our site for the products that I showed you today, and you can order direct online. You can pay through our website and everything. So once again, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. I'm going to sign off. I said this once already, but I really mean it this time. And I'm going to see you later today because we're going to stream some videos that we did yesterday that I wasn't 100% happy with. So we're going to do that. So if you want to just stay tuned to our Twitch TV channel, that would be great because I'm not sure exactly when I can commit to being live, but I'm just going to start streaming some stuff. So maybe this will entertain you somehow. All right. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Don't touch anything.